Welcome back. Today's video I am going to be going through the entire Cosmere and giving you a reading order. There are over 20 books in the Cosmere and it is hard to know where to go next after your reading. If you haven't seen my other video about where to start reading in the Cosmere, I definitely suggest checking that out because there are a couple of different places that you can start when reading the Cosmere. But for this video I'm only going to cover one just for sake of time and for the amount of stuff that is going to be in this video. Let's get into it. The place that I suggest starting for this video is Mistborn: The Final Empire. And then after that, Well of Ascension and Hero of Ages. This is known as Mistborn Era 1. Now these are a really good stepping point into the Cosmere. It gives you a really good insight into Brandon's writing styles and the way that he introduces magic systems into his world. Now Mistborn does have an Era 2, but I do not suggest reading it next. What I do suggest reading next is Elantris. Elantris is a standalone book, but there are a couple of novellas that can be read in conjunction with it. So after Elantris, I suggest Hope of Elantris. Hope of Elantris is in the Arcanum Unbounded, but it is a short story that deals with events that is going on during the events of Elantris. After that, I suggest going into Emperor's Soul. Emperor's Soul is another novella in Arcanum Unbound, but it is not a side piece to Elantris. It just takes place on the same world. So there are a couple of connections back into Elantris there, but it is a really good standalone as well, and this could really be read at any time, but I definitely suggest reading it before Mistborn Era 2. Which brings us into Mistborn Era 2. Starting out with the 11th Metal. The 11th Metal isn't officially Mistborn Era 2, it takes place before the Final Empire. It is also a novella that can be found in the Arcanum Unbound, and was a companion piece to the Mistborn adventure game. Then after that, go into Alloy of Law. Alloy of Law is the first official book in the Mistborn Era 2 series. The reason that I broke up Mistborn Era 1 and Era 2 is because Mistborn Era 1 ends on a really high earth-shattering note. And then there is a 300-year gap between Mistborn Era 2 and Mistborn Era 1. It is kind of jarring to go straight from Hero of Ages into Alloy of Law. That's why I gave a little bit of a break with a refresher with the 11th Metal on some of the events that happened in Mistborn Era 1. After Alloy of Law, move on to Shadows for Silence in the Forest of Hell. Now this is not a Mistborn book, this is another one that is in the Arcanum Unbound and is a brief novella. It is one of the lesser known works in the Cosmere. It is definitely a good read and one of Brandon's forays into the horror genre. I put this here just for a little bit of a break from Alloy of Law and getting into Shadows of Self, which is the second Mistborn Era 2 book. It gets into some of the references that you will find in Shadows of Self. Which leads us into Shadows of Self, the second Mistborn Era 2 book. After Shadows of Self, going on to Allomancer Jak. Allomancer Jak is a standalone novella that follows a Allomancer named Jak. It is shorter and is found in the Arcanum Unbound. The next book in Mistborn Era 2 is Bands of Mourning. Now at this point in the Mistborn Era 2, we're getting into some of the heavier earth-changing events, but still not quite earth-shattering. Because of the events in Bands of Mourning, I would put Mistborn Secret History right after this. A lot of people argue that Mistborn Secret History should be read after Mistborn Era 1. I disagree because there are some subplots in Bands of Mourning that are spoiled by the reading of Mistborn Secret History. Mistborn Secret History is also found in the Arcanum Unbound. Now at this point we move on from Mistborn Era 2. Mistborn Era 2 is not finished, there is still one more book in the series, but I think that it is worth waiting until you read the rest of the Cosmere before you read that book. Brandon has said that he is taking off the gloves in Cosmere connections, and the Lost Metal is heavy on those Cosmere connections. So I am going to put that one near the end. Moving on from Mistborn Era 2 into White Sands. White Sands is a short story in the Arcanum Unbound, but there is also some graphic novels that go along with it. I have not personally read these, but I would, if you can get your hands on these, put them right here. There is a short story within Arcanum Unbound if you cannot get your hands on the graphic novels. The next one that I suggest is Warbreaker. Warbreaker is another standalone that may get some sequels later on down the road, but is a really good standalone book. It also is a really good introduction into another series called the Stormlight Archive. which brings us into the Stormlight Archive. Way of Kings, the first Stormlight Archive book. Then Words of Radiance, number 2. Edgedancer is a novella that goes off of the events of Words of Radiance and should be read after Words of Radiance. Then going into Stormlight Archive 3, Oathbringer. Then to take a little bit of break from the Stormlight Archive, because those are longer and heavier books, I suggest Sixth of the Dusk. This is a standalone novella found in the Arcanum Unbounded, and some of the references in the Stormlight Archive will be understood after reading this book. Then going into Dawnshard. Dawnshard is part of the Stormlight Archive. It is a novella that comes after Oathbringer that should be read before Rhythm of War. And then after Dawnshard, Rhythm of War, which is the most recent Stormlight Archive book. And that wraps up the Stormlight Archive for this reading order. Then after Stormlight Archive, go into The Lost Metal. The Lost Metal is the last of the Mistborn Era 2 books and ties up the era really, really nice. Like I said earlier in the video, Brandon has said that this book is gloves off in Cosmere references. So it is chock full of references from throughout the Cosmere. After The Lost Metal, this is where I will put Tress of the Emerald Sea. Because of the amount of crossovers and references to the wider Cosmere, I have put this very, very last in the reading order. There is references to almost every single book in Tress of the Emerald Sea. In my Where to Start video, I did put this as a really good starting point, which I still agree with, but if you're going through an entire Cosmere reading order, I have to put this last just because of the amount of Cosmere references. And that's it for the entire Cosmere. If I have missed a book or you disagree with the reading order, let me know in the Arcanum down below. I am not only on YouTube, I am also on TikTok under ADHD_projects. I also have an Instagram that you can reach out to me and kind of connect to me directly. I also do a Cosmere style role-playing game that can be found on World Hopper's Table on YouTube. We also stream it about every other week on Twitch as well, also under World Hopper's Table. If you like this video, I would really appreciate a like and a comment down below. If you enjoy Brandon Sanderson's Cosmere and fantasy books as a whole, definitely give me a follow and hit the bell icon so you never miss another episode. Happy Year of the Sanderson.